Good morning. Welcome to Fox Chase Farm. Fox Chase Farm is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It is located in the northeast section of Philadelphia. As you come in on the driveway, on the left side you will see the garden. So the garden is a very large spot that we have here on the property where we grow all of our fruits and vegetables. So we have many different kinds of fruits and vegetables. In the far back of the garden, you can see all the different fruit trees. We have different kinds of fruit, including apples, pears, plums. We even have a quince tree. Quince is a very unique kind of fruit that most people don't even know about. Other interesting vegetables that we have here are we have tons and tons of tomatoes. We grow um, almost 3 to 4,000 pounds of tomatoes. That's a lot of tomatoes. Then we also grow many different varieties of other interesting vegetables, including peppers. We have potatoes. We have different greens, including lettuce, Swiss chard, collard greens. We even have different kinds of unique vegetables such as sweet potatoes. I love sweet potatoes. You put a little bit of marshmallow on it and a little bit of cinnamon, and it tastes wonderful. But we also grow other kind of vegetables including beans, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage. Yeah, yes, I know many of you guys don't like your vegetables, but sometimes you don't even realize you're eating vegetables. They're that good. Vegetables are in pretty much everything you eat, and yet you don't even notice it. And different things like ketchup. Ketchup is made up of tomatoes. Pickles, those are cucumbers. We grow plenty of cucumbers as well. But the thing about those are there's different kinds of cucumbers. There's two different kinds. There's a slicing cucumber, which are typically longer and thinner, while there is a pickling cucumber, which is very small, and those are which are designated only for pickles. But we also have a new building coming into the garden fairly soon. We have our school store. So the school store will be coming in late November, and what we'll be doing is we will be selling some of the fruits and vegetables that we have here, that we grow here on the farm. We will also be selling other different things, including plants. We'll be selling Christmas wreaths come the season. And we also will be selling different things that we have at the farm, including honey. We'll sell different things, including our shirts, our mugs. We'll have a large variety. And the garden is a very important spot because this shows all the different things that we can grow. We can even grow different things, including corn, pumpkins, watermelons, squash. We grow many different things. And you can grow fun things at home. You can even grow it in a cup on a windowsill in your home. Or you can, if you have yard, you can put some seeds in the dirt and see what you can grow. It is so easy to grow anything. All you need is just a seed to put it in the cup and you're fine. Water it, make sure it grows well, and you can have your own fruits and vegetables. So after the garden, we have what is called an riparian buffer. A riparian buffer is a designated area that is mostly naturalized, so they just let it grow up. Typically, it's full of trees, shrubs, and different herbs and plants. This is important because it helps clean the water. So typically, right in the middle there, you can see there's just this little yellow sign on the fence at the bottom there. That is right where the creek is. So that creek goes down and goes into a larger creek. But what if that creek, there was something spilled into it? Let's say there was a little bit of, let's herbicide. that was put in the field that's next to it. When it rains, that herbicide runs down and enters the creek. Eventually, that creek will take that herbicide further down into the larger creek. And that is bad. That is not good for the environment. So, what we do instead is we create a riparian buffer. This causes trees and other plants to slow the spread of the runoff. So say we spray the herbicide up in the pasture in the field there. Then when it rains, the water gets washed down, but it hits the trees. And once it hits the trees and the different kind of plants, it will stop the water from going into the creek, and it'll take time and it will cause the water to seep into the ground. And as that happens, the herbicide starts to disappear and it won't get into the creek as fast. Eventually, as it eventually kind of evaporates or goes away, the water that had the herbicide is in the ground and it doesn't reach the creek. So then it won't reach the larger creek and it won't affect the environment. So what this does is we put different trees in there. There's different things including sycamores, there's black willows, there's different kinds of shrubs including spice bush or even kind of little raspberry plants. All these different plants really help clean that water and get rid of all the different insecticides or herbicides. Herbicides are what kind of kills weeds or bad plants, while insecticides kill insects. Typically, they're sprayed on fruits and vegetables or even fields to get rid of pests or weeds that might come into play with the different crop that we're growing. Well, when we're growing different things like tomatoes and the weeds grow up, it interferes with the growing of the tomatoes. So some people spray an herbicide on the weeds so that the weeds can't grow up. On our garden, we do not do that. We keep it 100% organic. We don't want any kinds of different herbicides or pesticides. Those are chemicals we really don't want on our plants. So we keep that clean. But a riparian buffer is a good opportunity to help clean the water from other things. Well, when we drive by on the road, sometimes a little bit of oil or gas will get onto the road. And this riparian buffer will prevent that or gas from getting into the creek. But what we also do is this is a very important kind of wildlife area. So whether it's different kinds of reptiles or amphibians, reptiles are things like turtles or snakes. Amphibians are different things like frogs and toads. They will be part of this because they'll be by the creek. And those are important when if an insecticide or a herbicide touches those animals, they will surely die because they breathe through their skin. Things like frogs and toads, they breathe through their skin. And if something gets in their skin, that's not good for them. So repair and buffers are very important areas. They also are homes to different animals, including birds. Birds love these because it provides some food for them. It provides cover. But we'll see another area up the tour here that's also very important to some animals. On the right side of the road as you're coming into the farm, this is the pasture. This is a very large open field where there's different kinds of grasses. This is where we let the animals come and eat. So as you see here, we have some cows on the pasture. But what exactly are they doing and eating? That is exactly what a pasture is. It's a wide open area where they come and eat, and they eat different kinds of grasses. So there are specifically two main idea of grasses: a warm season grass and a cool season grass. Cool season grasses typically grow in the early part of the year, And what they'll do is they'll grow and they'll be very short. That is what a typical lawn grass is. So whether it's Kentucky bluegrass or annual ryegrass, they're a short grass that needs a lot of water. They're typically in northern United States. You won't see these much down south because it gets too hot. But then there's also warm season grasses. And we do have some warm season grasses up here. They include different things, including a switchgrass, or blue stem grass, or Indian grass. Those are different kinds of grasses that will actually grow really tall. And they'll provide a seed, and sometimes different animals will eat the seeds, including birds. But what we have here is we have the cows that are eating down the pasture, and we'll move them to different types of pasture. One will be here in the front of the property, while later in a couple of weeks, we'll move it maybe across the street or across the driveway, and they'll eat on that pasture. Later on, maybe in a month or two, we'll move it to behind the farm on the back side of the property, and they'll have that large pasture for a couple weeks or a couple months. Then we'll keep moving. This is called pasture rotation or rotational grazing. This prevents the cows from eating the grass all the way down to the dirt. Because when they eat the grass all the way down to the dirt, that's not good for the grass, and it might actually kill the grass and it won't be able to come back. Versus if we let them eat here and then they move on to another pasture, we can allow that grass to grow up and it'll become healthier and more lush for them to come back on later in the year and eat more grass. But this is also where we do a lot of our hay. We'll talk about hay later on, but the pastures that we have here, this is where we cut the grass so we can grow and make hay bales. We'll talk about that later, but pastures are a critical part of the farm here. So the cows that we saw before, those are beef cows. Beef cows are cows that are made specifically for beef, the product that we eat. So they can make different things, including hamburgers or steaks. The cows that we typically have on the farm, those are black Angus. But we also have different varieties, including the Baldy, which is right there with the white on its face. We also had a Hereford, which is reddish with different white in different places, including on its face and on its legs and tail. So beef cows, they are the same as all other cows. It's just that there are different species. So, like I mentioned before, the Black Angus or the Herefords, those are different species of cows. But then dairy cows are also different species. I'll get into that later. But for beef cows, they are bred to be more bulkier and bigger. They have more muscle, but they also have a lot more fat. And that is good. Fat is flavor in cooking. So in beef cows, they are important to be bigger and meatier. And the females, they are the ones that do produce milk. They produce only enough milk to provide for its calf, though, versus a dairy cow, which will provide a lot more milk. But we'll discuss that later. So beef cows, they're the ones that we have on pasture, and they're the ones that will move to different areas. They will spend their entire life on pasture. And what we'll do is we'll feed them hay during the winter time when there isn't grass growing, but during the summertime, the spring, summer, and fall, they'll have all the grass that they could possibly want to eat. Then sometimes when they're about to when they're done out on pasture, they'll come in and they'll eat grain, and that is called grain finished. But some people who like grass fed, they'll spend their entire life eating grass, the cows will. So this is our milking cow. This is a specific breed called a Holstein. Holsteins are one of the most common breeds of milking cows. There is also another kind called Jersey. They're the brown one looking ones, but they're not the ones that produce chocolate milk. No, they all produce milk, and milk is what typically feeds their young. But the milking cows, they were bred to produce a ton of milk so that when the farmer can come, they can come and milk the cows. And it'll provide milk for you and I to drink. We can use milk in our cereal. Milk is used in different things, including ice cream. Ice cream is delicious, and there's milk in tons of different things, including cheese. Milk is a very important part of our diet. It also provides calcium. Calcium is what gives us strong bones and will give us a lot healthier lifestyle. So as you look at the cow, you can see she's a lot thinner than the other cows. That is because she is a milking cow. Compared to the beef cows, which are more bulkier and are bred to have a lot more fat, the milking cows or the dairy cows, they're not bred to have that much fat. They don't need that much fat because they're not going to be used for meat. So milking cow is essential to provide milk for us to drink. And milk is a very important part of our diet. So this is the dairy parlor. This is typically where cows will come in and get milked. So what happens is a cow's every morning, typically it's twice a day. So every morning and every evening, the cow will get in line and they will go to their own stall or stanchion. And what the person will do, or the farmer, they'll come up to the cow, they'll clean what is called the udder. The udder is the place where the milk is stored and comes from. They'll put the machine on the udder, and the machine will use some mechanics, and it will suck the milk out of the udder. It will leave enough for the baby, but it will suck all the milk out of the udder. And what will happen then is the milk will then be put in a big holding tank, and that will be what we call pasteurized. Pasteurization is when we get the milk high enough temperature that it kills all the bad things, including bacteria or germs, the things that can make us sick. So what we'll do is the farmer will use the machine connected to the cow's udder. The machine will suck out the milk, and it's all good for the cow. It doesn't harm the cow at all. Or once the milk is taken out, it will go into a big tank. The tank will sterilize or pasteurize the milk. The milk will then go onto a big truck. The truck will then take it to a big facility where they will pasteurize it, and then they'll start bottling it. They'll put it in a carton, and then they take it to your store, or the store will come pick it up. And that's when you take it off the shelf and then you pour it into your bowl of cereal or whatever you're making. That is how milk gets from the cow to cereal. But how many gallons of milk does a cow produce exactly? The average is 8 to 10 gallons of milk a day. That's a lot of milk. The average person doesn't drink that much in a day. But cows produce a lot of milk. This milk is used also to make different things, including ice cream or cheese. Milk is in a lot of the different things that we eat, but it is so healthy for us. It gives us calcium, which makes us have some very strong bones. It's also good for us in that it helps just building us stronger. Whole milk is what people would say is the least it is the least expensive. That's because it's typically the least amount of processed. But things like skim milk is typically more expensive than whole milk because it is more processed. So whole milk is 97% fat free. So it has only 3% of fat in it. Skim milk has 0% of fat. But the thing is, whole milk also is a lot more creamier than skim milk. I preference whole milk because it adds a lot more creamier to it. But then higher fat would include things like cream that you would pour into different drinks, including coffee, or whipped cream, which is very heavy cream that is whipped really fast, so it adds air and it makes the whipped cream. Cream or milk is very important in all of our diets, and I hope you drink more of it because it is so good for us. So after you pass the pasture, you come up to a little lot on the right side at the gate. This is what we call our arboretum. Now, what exactly is an arboretum? An arboretum is essentially a tree museum. So the point of it is to have many, many different species of trees, just to show there are different types. We'll have many, many different types to come, but if you look in the picture, you don't see many trees. There are currently a lot of trees being planted now. Some of the trees that are there and are being planted include different things like river birch or black oak. There are other kinds, including an apple tree that's in there. There's flowering dogwood. There's even some shrubs, like a witch hazel. Just because it's a tree, it's an arboretum, doesn't mean you can't have only trees. You can have many different types of plants too. Because it is a museum, you want to show all the different types of things that there are, different types of trees. Currently, in our arboretum, we have over 30 different types of trees. 30. That is a lot. Our end goal is to have almost 50, if not 60. We want to have as many trees as possible. Now, what is so important about this? Why is it even necessary? An arboretum is necessary to show people the amount of diversity there is. So, diversity is just the different types there are. So, one oak tree is so different than the eastern white pine. The the white mulberry is completely different than the flowering dogwood. The white mulberry has interesting things like a waxy leaf almost, while a flowering dogwood has a very, very, very soft and very fragile leaf. Now, something interesting is we want to have a lot of native species. Now, what is native and what is non native? We'll get into that more when we go into the wildlife area. But something about this is we want to have many different kinds of trees. Some of them are native to the United States, others not so much. But we also have some that are native to the United States but aren't necessarily native to eastern United States. Some of them would be including the single Colorado blue spruce. As in the name per tells, it's from Colorado and out west, so typically in the Rocky Mountains. So they're not native to the eastern United States, but we still have it in the display to show the different types of trees there are. So the arboretum is so important because it adds tree cover, but also shows the many different types of trees that we have. So go around, explore, see how many types you can count. We're always adding more. So this is our nature area. This is the area that once you come through the gate, you see on the right side with all the different trees there. There are two different trails that you can go on. You can walk around it, but you can also go into the center. And in the middle there is a bird blind. The bird blind is an area where you can hide and be behind a board so you can see all the different kinds of creatures that there are. There might be a red-bellied woodpecker, or there might even be an eastern chipmunk that might scurry through the woods. You never know what you might find. But this area is very important, and certainly in a big city like Philadelphia. These nature areas are critical areas because they provide habitat for all these different animals. Some areas, like in some areas of Philly, there aren't many trees, and trees are important to these animals. So having just a little bit of a nature area is really crucial. Now, in this woods here, in this little nature area, there's many different types of plants and animals. Some of them are what we would say native, which is from eastern United States. Things like the eastern hemlock that is native. Also, the white oak, which is native. There's also a black oak, which is also native. But then there are other non-native plants. There's this tree called the tree of heaven. Now that's very invasive. It is non-native to the United States, and will actually what's the difference exactly of non-native and native? Non-native is when it is not from the area. So things like these tree of heaven, they are not native to the area. They are from different countries of the world. And what happens is these trees will come to United States. People do use them in different ways. Sometimes they'll plant the seeds because it's a nice specimen tree. But the issue is with these invasive trees is they will compete with the native trees, and they aren't as good for native wildlife. So what is more important to things like a gray squirrel? What is more important? An oak tree that provides oak trees, or this tree of heaven that doesn't do much for the animals? Of course, the oak trees are more important. The thing is, these tree of heavens grow so fast and so quick that there's not enough area that they can take over an area before the oak trees even establish. So the oak trees don't get to grow. And then also, I don't know how many of you guys have heard, but there's a really bad bug. Now, this bad bug has been taken over a lot of a lot of Pennsylvania, and is starting to spread in eastern United States. It's called the spotted lanternfly. That's that little bug in the lower left-hand corner. That little bug may look colorful and interesting, but it is not a good bug. What it does is it taps into the tree, sucks out all the sap or as much sap as it can have, which can actually, if there's enough bugs, enough of these lanternflies, it could kill the tree. So things like maple trees are being extremely affected by these bugs, and some are even dying because these bugs are actually killing the trees. Now, I don't know how many of you guys like grapes, but grapes are an important part in a lot of agriculture. You eat them, and some people drink it in juice. But these bugs love grapes. And what they'll do is they'll find the stem of the grapevine, they'll tap into the grapevine stem, drink out that sap, and it will kill that grapevine. So these bugs are not good. And they're not even from the United States. They were brought in accidentally on a pallet of rock. The eggs are they look like it looks like mud that was scraped on whether it's rocks or bark, and out they come these little nymphs that eventually turn into this lanternfly, and these bugs will just decimate all the native species. But there's also other non-native species too. If you see one of these lanternflies, try and kill it. Step on it. If not, it's okay. They're really good at jumping. So anyway, back at the native and non-native species. Other native species in shrubbery wise included spicebush or American holly, but there are some non-native bushes, including Japanese knotweed. Now, this Japanese knotweed and Japanese barberry, which is a very spiky plant, it almost feels like a needle's hitting you when you walk into it. They're bad bushes because they will just take over an entire area and they won't let the native species grow up. Another interesting about the Japanese barberry is ticks, like the little bad bugs that can get you Lyme disease. They love barberry. They love it because it provides cover for them. Mostly because that's where their mice live that have the ticks. So barberries are good to get rid of because not only are they non-native and they can get rid of them that way, but also it prevents the ticks from going there too. So that's hitting two birds with one stone, which is great. Now, nature areas are very important because, like I said, they provide a lot of habitat and a lot of cover. But let's see what else we have on the farm here. That is the wildlife. So the wildlife that runs all around the property is amazing. We have so many different kinds of birds and mammals and different types of reptiles and amphibians. I have a very long list of different types of animals. Now, let's see what wildlife we have. I have seen white-tailed deer, which is actually the state mammal of Pennsylvania, which is up in the right-hand corner there. Interestingly, the bottom left is our state bird, the ruffed grouse. Now, in Philadelphia, we don't have those. Those are more out up in the mountains and northern Pennsylvania and out western Pennsylvania. It likes a lot of the very wooded parts of Pennsylvania. So we don't have them around here. But they are still pretty cool birds. It's essentially a wild chicken. But also what we do have on the property is we have red fox, which I've seen many times. We also have other interesting things, including rabbits. We have gray squirrels. Once in a great while, we'll have a raccoon or a skunk pop by. The other day, there was a smell that smelled like a skunk was nearby, so we could tell that there was one close. But what about wildlife in Pennsylvania? There are many other kinds of wildlife in Pennsylvania, not only in Philadelphia. There are coyotes. There's other kinds of fox, including gray fox. There's porcupines and even black bears. Once in a very great while, we'll have one black bear that might go astray and randomly end up in Philadelphia. A year ago, that's exactly what happened. I don't know how it came down from the mountains up in northern Pennsylvania, but it entered Philadelphia and just wandered through town. Eventually, it made its way back. But there's other interesting animals too. There's different kinds of mammals, including bobcats. There are different kinds of squirrels, including a fox squirrel and a red squirrel. But also there's different kinds of small animals, including box turtles, there's garter snakes. Those you can find at the farm. But then there's also different kinds of reptiles and amphibians that are harder to get, including things like a wood turtle or even a timber rattlesnake. Now, those are pretty cool, but those are dangerous. You don't want to get close to them. And you can find those up in northern Pennsylvania or out of Philly. But Pennsylvania has a lot of interesting animals, and these are just two examples of the creatures you can find in Pennsylvania. One you can even find in Philadelphia. Let me give you a brief history of Fox Chase Farm. So, Fox Chase Farm is very old. It is over 200 years old. The present farm is about 112 acres and has had many owners, and the size has changed slightly over the years. Now, It was originally deeded to William Stanley in 1682 by William Penn. William Penn is our founder of the state of Pennsylvania, hence Penn. Now, Pennsylvania, what does that stand for? That stands for Penn's Woods. Penn's as in William Penn. So the farm is then deeded to William Stanley in 1682, and it was called Mount Stanley. And on maps, it was referred to as Mount Stanley. Now, Gwynn's Mill was built there along the Pennypack Creek. So the mill was a grist mill, which means it processed different grains, including wheat and corn. So this back then was a very agricultural area, and they provided a lot of grains, and there needed to be a mill so the grains can be processed. So it eventually was then deeded to a Friends Society and operated as a dairy farm. Now, the cows were milked and vegetables were grown for the table. The Lorimore family then purchased the land from the Friends Society, and Horace Lorimore's son lived in the manor house. And the manor house is that building right there in 1928. Then, in 1939, Harold Butler purchased the estate from the Lorimores and hired Irwin Glancy as a caretaker that same year. The Butlers kept Herefords and Black Angus cattle on the farm, so he kept a lot of those beef cows that we talked about. But they also kept other animals, including pigs, sheep, and goat and horses. Now, eventually, the manor house dates back to the early 1800s, so it's a very old building. Mr. Glancy worked on the farm as a caretaker from 1939 to 1982. He planted fields and raised livestock. He lived there with his wife in a small farmhouse. The farmhouse is the oldest building on the farm. Now, there's a lot of different buildings on the farm. One of Glancy's first projects was to build a large barn. Now, that is what we call the pig barn. He built it in 1940. But in the early 2000s and 2001, the building had to be gutted and modernized and reconstructed so that it could be safer for people and students. Now, some of the stone walls were still there, and you can still see them if you stop by. But Butler passed away in 1968 at the age of 78. Now, the plans were to build 884 garden type apartments on the farm, but that stopped by zoning restrictions. In 1980, the funds from the federal government and the city of Philadelphia, Abington Township, and Montgomery County, the property was then, the entire 112 acres were then purchased and were given to the park system so that we, as the school district of Philadelphia, could then run the facility. It was originally preserved to keep the Pennypack Creek from the damage of urban development. So back when we were talking about riparian buffers, this was essentially a giant riparian buffer. This was made to prevent the Pennypack Creek from being damaged. Now, this is a huge important part for the Greenbelt. Greenbelt is a very natural area and a very urban development. So this saves a lot of the natural areas so we can have a lot of trees and a lot of grass and many different natural areas for people to enjoy. The facility now is run and operated by the City of Philadelphia in the education. So the school district of Philadelphia is the one who runs the property and is used for teaching the property. So what you see around here, this is all Philadelphia. And we hope that you get to learn a lot of the different types of farming that happens still in Philadelphia, in a city that still does farming. So these are our donkeys. We have two of them here on the property. We also have used to have horses, but not any longer. These two donkeys are used for many different things. Donkeys in the world are used for different things, including packing. So people would put different things like their suitcases on the back of these donkeys, and they would use them to travel to different places. So some people used it to travel to town, while other people use it to pull stuff, whether it's a cart or anything like that. Now, horses are still used in some areas, and so are donkeys in some areas of the world. Out in central Pennsylvania, in places like Lancaster County, there's a lot of people that still use horses to pull things like plows or even harvest crops because they don't use tractors. Instead, they use horses. Now, horses and donkeys are also pretty important too because things like the donkeys, we use them as a security system. Now, when you enter the property and we're not expecting you, the donkeys will make a noise. They'll do their hee-haws noise, and we will know that somebody or something is here. The donkeys are essentially a security system for us. So they are very important, and they're pretty nice to have. They're very gentle animals. So people use horses for other things as well. So horses are used for riding, they're used for pulling different things, but they're also very nice to have. So many people have them to ride in different things, including trail rides. Some people even barrel race with them, which is when they run around barrels with horses. So they're essentially riding the horses in different activities or events. Now, horses and donkeys are really cool to have, but we have a lot of animals on the farm that we'll get to. So come on and let's see what else we have here. Our chickens. Now, this is probably my favorite part because I love birds. So our chickens that we have here on the farm, we mostly have them for eggs. So yes, that's where eggs come from. The eggs that you eat for breakfast or wherever, whatever you eat eggs for or with. Many different baked goods have eggs in them. They come from chickens. The typical chicken will lay about one egg a day. They don't need a rooster to lay eggs either. Now, one chicken will lay on average about 300, if not more than 300 eggs a year. That's a lot of eggs. But chickens are used for other things, including meat, because we all love chicken. Many people like different things like chicken fingers, chicken nuggets, but also different things including chicken pot pie or even different things like chicken parmesan. Chicken is used in so many different things, and a lot of people like chicken. It is one of the most diverse foods that you can use. Everybody says it tastes like chicken. That's what most people say different things taste like. So, chickens are a very interesting animal. Now, let's give you a little biology about birds. So birds don't have two things. They don't have teeth. So how do they eat their food? They have something called a crop. So what they do is they'll go around in the dirt and they'll pick up little tiny stones and that is called grit. What they'll do is they'll eat the grit and they'll keep it in this thing called their crop. And what eventually happens is the food that they eat come goes down their throat and dentures their crop. Then inside, all that grit that's in there mashes up that food and essentially breaks it up like our teeth breaks up our food. Then it goes into the body and the food is utilized. Now, another interesting thing about chickens and all birds is their bones are very unique. So back when we drank our milk to get very strong bones, something interesting about chickens is their bones are hollow. So our bones are thick and dense, and it is fully bone entirely. Chickens have hollow bones, and all birds have hollow bones, so that they could fly. Now, chickens aren't really a flying bird. If they wanted to, they can jump up into a tree. They don't fly, though, like most birds do. But they can fly due to they can get up into the tree due to the fact that they have hollow bones. Now, those are two very interesting things about chickens and all birds. We also have other varieties of poultry, including turkeys. Now, turkeys is that traditional Thanksgiving meal that you eat. Turkeys are pretty cool, but they're a lot bigger than chickens. Other interesting animals that people have on farms are ducks and geese. Those are all pretty cool looking birds too. Now let's see what other cool animals we have on the farm. The bees. The bees are an insect that are so important. Now, bees are so critical to any farm because that is what helps pollinate the fruits and vegetables. So we can't have fruits and vegetable without bees because they're the ones that pollinate the flowers. So all fruit and vegetables, most of them, are pollinated from one flower to another. So things like apples, you need two flowers to be able to pollinate. Same with things like zucchini or different things like cherries. They need to be pollinated to different flowers. And without bees, we wouldn't be able to pollinate them. They need to be pollinated. So, because of this, bees make a product called honey. Now, honey is a very good natural sweetener. We use it in different things, including baking or cooking, but also a lot of people add it to tea as a sweetener. Now, you can eat honey plain because it is so healthy. Fun fact here is honey never expires. It will never, ever go bad. That's pretty cool. So you can put honey on a shelf, totally forget about it. 10 years later, come back, and it is still as good as the day you put it there. So what you see in the right hand corner is our beehive. So that's one of the beehives that we have on the property. And bees will go in and out of that, and that's where their home is. So on the left side there, that is what you call a bee honeycomb. And each one of those different circles, that is full of honey. It's not a lot of honey, but it is full of honey. And when somebody's ready to harvest the honey, they'll take out the big square of honeycomb and they'll spin it really, really, really fast in a cool machine. And the honey comes flying out, and people then gather the honey. Then you either can eat it straight, plain, or some people make it into different cool crafts. Some people will make it into uh, they'll fill up a bear and you can have a little squeeze bottle full of honey, or people make little honey sticks that you can eat too. Some people add flavoring to make it cool, different flavors. Now, another interesting thing is the honey will taste different based off the different types of flowers. So, a lot of interesting honey might be from orange flowers. So, orange honey comes from pollination of the orange flower, while another wildflower honey comes from the bees mostly pollinating wildflowers. Now, it could also be different in color too. So, lighter color honey is from typically lighter flowers like wildflowers, while a very dark honey can be from different things like buckwheat, which will provide a darker honey. That's more of a stronger, robust honey. Now, don't get too close to these bees. They do sting and they could hurt. So, let's go see what other animals we have here on the farm. Well, let's actually see what some of these animals eat. So, this here is our cornfield. Now, corn is an important part in all the animals' diets. Most animals eat corn in some form. Some of them eat the whole kernels, but some of them also eat mashed up kernels. Now, this provides a very important food for them. But some other important food are different types of grains. Now, most common grains are types that grow in rows. So these row crops are very important. There is 5 main different types of row crops. There is corn, there's wheat, which is made into things like bread. There's soybeans, which is made into different items, including oil. Sugarcane, which makes your sugar. But then cotton. Now, cotton is what makes up a lot of your clothing, including your shirts and your jeans. Now, all these grow in what we call rows, so they're classified as row crops. But within that, there are different types of wheat or soybeans or corn. Now, in wheat, there are two varieties called spring and winter. Now, a spring wheat is more softer and is more for baking, while your winter wheat is more for your all-purpose or your cooking. So that's what a lot of people make use when they make things like pasta, while your spring wheat is what a lot of people use to make light and fluffy, like pastries. Now, what about corn, though? There are two main kinds of corn. There's something called field corn, which is animal feed, but also can be used to make different things like corn flour or cornmeal, which is used then to make cornbread. But also sweet corn, which we use to eat plain. Now, sweet corn is the corn that you eat off the cob or sometimes comes in a can. That's the plain corn that we eat. Now, all these grains are very important because they feed us and the animals. Now, let's see what else we have on the farm. So here are our sheep and some of our goats. On our right side are sheep and the bottom is a goat. Now, when we talk about agriculture, we think of 3 main ideas: food, fuel, and fiber. Food is stuff that we eat. Fuel is stuff that we use, such as gasoline, which in some cases, corn is used to make gasoline. But then fiber, now that's things that we use to make things like clothing. So cotton is used for clothing, but also sheep's wool. The wool that you see on these sheep are then sheared off. It doesn't hurt the animals, so it's like giving them a haircut. So when we have really long hair and we need it cut, we get it cut. These animals, when they get really long hair, we give them a cut, and then that is used to make different things, including wool sweaters or wool blankets. These are very important because they can be used to keep us warm. But another interesting thing is they can be used for food. So many different people in many different countries eat sheep and goats. In a lot of countries, goat is an important part of their diet, and sheep can be used in many different recipes too. So sheep and goats are very important in agriculture because it can be used for two different things. Now, what's interesting thing about these are sheep and goats, along with other animals that we saw, including horses and cows. They are what we call ruminants. Now, ruminants are an interesting species of mammals because they have different types of stomach than we do. Now, when we say that they had different types of stomach, what does that even mean? So, interesting thing is that they have four different chambers to their stomach. So, things like cows, sheep, and goats, they have four different parts of the stomach. Compared to horses and people, we only have one chamber. Now, why is this important? So, animals like cows and sheep, what they'll do is they mostly eat grass. So the issue with grass is it's really, really hard to digest. So what they do is they swallow it. They first chew it, then they swallow it, then it goes into the first chamber. That gets out any of the bad stuff. Sometimes a cow might eat something like a nail, and that's not good for them. So this first chamber catches that nail so it doesn't hurt the animal. Then later in the stomach, it gets caught and the grass gets caught and it starts to break down. But it doesn't break down as much as it needs to. So then later on, it goes back up into the throat, into the mouth, and the cow starts chewing it. This is what it's called cud. So this is a normal process for these animals. So when you see a cow and they're chewing the cud, which means they are chewing the grass that came back up so that can be further broken down. They swallow it again, then it gets processed. So grass is very hard to digest. Even though that's what they eat, it's very hard to digest. So they have to chew it many different times. So these are very interesting animals, and certainly goats and sheep since they can be used for many different things. Let's see what else we have on the farm. Rabbits. Yes, yes, rabbits. Some people have little rabbits as pets. Now, rabbits can be used for many different things. They can be used as a pet, of course, but many countries eat rabbits. So rabbits are an important white meat. So just like chicken is a white meat and cow or beef is a red meat, rabbits are important white meat for people to eat. Now, rabbits can also be used for different things because their fur can be used for fiber. So like sheep were used, their wool was used to make different things like sweaters. Rabbit fur can also be used to make different things like coats or hats. Now, it's not used as much as it was before, but a lot of different countries still use rabbits as meat and food. So in America, a lot of people still eat rabbits, whether it's the domesticated rabbit or some people still go out and hunt rabbit to eat. Rabbits are a very important meat source to many people. But some people like to look at them as cute and cuddly pets. And that is totally fine because they are very nice pets to have. But let's see what else we have on the farm. So one interesting thing that we have is a lot of maple sugar trees. All those trees that are lining the trail or the path as you drive in here, Those are all maple trees. Now, maple trees can be used for different things. A lot of people cut them down and use them for wood. But something interesting is the sugar maple tree can be used to make something we call maple syrup. Now, how is that used? So, or how do they get it even? Because it's a tree. So, you have to be very precise in the time of year. It's typically in the month of February and March. What we'll do is we'll drill a hole into the tree and we'll take a bucket and we'll hang it on the tree. So in wintertime, a lot of the sap is frozen. But as the spring comes around and in February and March, the sap starts to run and goes to the tree. The tree pulls up the water from the ground and takes it up into the tree so that it can be used. Now, while this sap is starting to be pulling up, and if we drill a hole, the sap starts coming out. It comes out and it drops into this bucket. This bucket then can be used to make maple syrup. So what we do is we then take this bucket and we pour it into a big area or a big pot and we start to boil it. Now, it's a very time taking process. So 40 gallons of maple syrup sap will only make 1 gallon of actual maple syrup. So for a lot of sap, you don't get very much syrup. But it is very sweet and very delicious on pancakes and waffles. So some of the different tools that we use to make it is called a tap, a maple syrup tap. That's a little metal piece that we stick into the tree, and that's what makes the sap come out. So, what we then do is we then pour it into this big thing called a vat. That vat is then put on top of a fire, as you see below, and all the fire makes the maple sap boil. Eventually, all the water is boiled out, and what's left is the sugar or the syrup. And that is how we make maple syrup. Sometimes it's even boiled down even further to make maple sugar. So it's almost like the sugar that some people put on in cookies or cakes or their tea. It's also the same sugar. It's a maple sugar that you can use for the exact same way. But let's see what else we have on the property. Right next door is what we call our hearth oven. Now, our hearth oven is a different type of oven. It gets very, very hot in there. And it is typically made of different things like clay or sand and mud. And it is used for cooking. So, what we do is we make a fire either inside of it or beneath it. And then we'll put some different food in there. So, your pizza that many people eat, those are best cooked in a hearth oven. So what we'll do is you see the fire being made in this hearth oven, you push the fire a little further back and you can put a whole pizza in there and the pizza will cook and it will be delicious. So hearth ovens are pretty cool and can be used in to make many different things. And it is used all around the world. So some people in some countries don't have ovens. Instead, they use different things like the hearth ovens here. So that is really cool and really interesting. So another important part of agriculture is what we looked at before, is like the woodlots and the trees. Now, forestry is a huge important part of agriculture because it provides a lot of fuel. Not only fuel, as in firewood, but also other interesting things that we make. Some of the things that we make are important, certainly to the state of Pennsylvania. So, Pennsylvania grows a lot of a species called white ash. Now, white ash is sadly dying and disappearing in the state due to an invasive species called the emerald ash borer. So, this emerald ash borer will dig into the tree, it will bore into the tree, make a hole, then it will lay its eggs in there. When the eggs hatch, the little baby emerald ash borers will then go all around the tree and drill a bunch of holes. Eventually, the tree can't survive and dies. Now, why is this white ash so important? Now, a lot of wooden baseball bats are made out of white ash. Almost all baseball bats are made out of white ash, and specifically Pennsylvania white ash. This is huge and very important to Pennsylvania forestry. Now, other things include cherry trees and oak trees. They're used to make a lot of furniture. So, different things including kitchen tables or kitchen cabinets. Those are made out of a lot of oak and cherry wood. Now, things like basswood, which is a very light wood, can be used to make different things that won't be needed for heavy building. So a lot of model airplanes are made out of things like basswood because it is so light. Now, an important tree is the eastern hemlock that we see on the right side there. Now, eastern hemlock is the state tree of Pennsylvania. That is so important to the state. Hemlock trees can be used for different things. To be Many are used as shade trees, but they are also used in different building projects because hemlock is a very nice looking wood. But unfortunately, the hemlocks are being affected by an invasive species called the hemlock woolly adelgid. This is a little tiny insect that sucks the sap out of the tree and eventually kills the tree because it drinks all of its sap. It's like the theory of the vampires drinking all the blood of a person or an animal. These little bugs drink all the sap out of the tree and kills the tree. So they're not the best for the tree, but it's a very important tree to the world and to the country and to the state. Now, let's see what other things that we have on the property. So something awesome is being a vet for the day. Now, unfortunately, we can't be vets for the day with the actual rabbit together. But you can still be a vet for the day by doing different things. Now, what you can do is you can see all those different things on the tables. Those are what we call stethoscopes. That is what we use to hear the heartbeat of different animals, including rabbits, as we see on the table. Now, what you can also do is put your hand over your heart and count how many times your heart beats. Now, that's the same way of hearing the heartbeat of the rabbit. Now, vets are very important because they take care of our pets. So, if your dog or your cat or your hamster or your little birdie, they're not doing too well, you can take it to the vet and the vet can take care of it and make it feel better. Vets are very important in agriculture too because say our cow gets sick, the vet will come, take a look at it, and hopefully can make it feel better. So vets are all very important, and we hope that some of you will one day want to be a vet as a job. So when you go home, Try and feel the heartbeat of your dog or your cat. If they sit still enough for you, we'll try and count how many beats their heart beats. And compare it to yourself and see who has more beats per minute. So as we go start winding around and we're finishing up our trail, our tour, we mentioned that a lot of the animals eat hay. So we saw that the cows were on pasture and all that was grass. Now, what exactly is hay and what is straw? So we hear both these words periodically. Now, hay is actually what people use to feed the animals. This is actually what the animals eat. It is made from grass, typically that is grown in pasture. The farmer cuts it when it gets high enough. Typically it's to your waist, and it will cut it and make it into bales. Now, it can be big bales that weigh almost 1,000 pounds, or it can be small bales that weigh about 45 pounds. Now, we typically feed large bales to things like cows, while we'll feed a small bale to things like the goats or the sheep. Now, what exactly is straw? So, straw is typically made of the stems of grain. So, wheat is grown on a small plant, and we just want the seeds on the head of the plant. But what happens to the rest of the wheat plant? That is what we use to make things like straw. Straw is typically used as livestock bedding. We can take the straw when we're building a pen or an enclosure for the animals and we'll throw it out and it's something soft for them to lay on. We lay on things like a pillow. Well, the straw is their pillow. This can be used for different things as well. Wheat straw can also be used to make newspapers, paperboard, and other important paper products. So wheat straw is a very universal product to be used. We'll show you some more animals. This is one of our last animals. These are our pigs. Now, pigs are one of the most, believe it or not, cleanest animals there are. We know pigs as an animal who likes to roll around in mud and likes to roll around in different things. Believe it or not, pigs are so clean. They are very organized animals. They have a specific area for sleeping. They have a specific area for spending their day. They even have a specific area where they do their business. But pigs can be so intelligent and so clean. But other cool things about pigs is they make delicious things like bacon and pork chops. Now, I love bacon, and pork can be used to make many different types of products. Different things like pork roll or even ham. Ham is a very interesting product that is actually used and cured. So, what does that mean, cured? It is essentially cured so it can last longer. What it is, it could be put on a shelf and eaten later. It doesn't have to be kept cool. But nowadays, a lot of the ham that we buy at the grocery store that needs to be put in the refrigerator. But ham didn't used to be. You could put it on a shelf, come back a year later and eat it. So that's some interesting things about pork and ham. They are very utilized animals and very smart. Let's see what else we have. Some of the cool farm toys. Now, this is a very fun and cool looking part of the farm. Now, I love to get up in these big tractors and use all the different types of tools. Some of the cool different things that we have is a tractor and the baler. So the top picture is an example of a tractor. The back thing is a baler. What happens is it picks up the hay that we cut and makes it into a bale. It'll roll it up and make it into a very large bale. Now, something underneath that picture is what we call a tedder. Now, those little spikes that come down, what happens is after the farmer cuts the hay, those little spikes turn really, really, really fast and spreads out the hay so that it can dry. Because when a farmer cuts the hay, it's typically full of moisture and it's wet. It needs to dry out so that it could last longer. If the farmer baled it while it was wet, it would eventually decompose and break down. Now, since the farmer bales it as dry, it can last longer, and there's no moisture making it decompose. We'll get into decomposing later, but we'll see what we can do, what else we have here. Now, the item next to that, next to the tedder, is what we call vertical tillage. Vertical tillage is how we break up the dirt to be able to plant different things. So whether it's corn or even the pasture, because we sometimes need to replant the pasture, we need to break up the ground to be able to plant the seeds. That's exactly what this does. This is different types of blades that go into the ground and breaks up the soil. Eventually the farmer comes by and plant seed in the soil that was broken up by this vertical tiller. Now, the last item we have in the lower left-hand corner is what we call a skid loader or a skid steer. It's called many different things. This is used for many different types of applications. This can be used to clean up. Maybe it's pens that the cows were in and made a mess. So we'll use it to scrape up the hay so we can put new hay down. Or maybe we're digging a hole and we have a lot of dirt that needs to be moved. What we'll do is we'll use the skid loader to scoop up the dirt and move it. Another cool thing is when we make the hay bales, so that baler, after it makes the bale, it will drop it in the fields. But how do we get the hay bales from the field to the barn where it can be stored for later storage? The skid loader has a little tool that you can put on it that it can go up and gather the bales so you can bring it into the hay barn. Now, there are many different types of tools that can be used on the skid loader. What it has on now is a bucket, and that's how we do things like dig in the dirt or clean the animal pens. But it also can be used to scoop up in things like rocks, or if we need to move heavy things, we can put it in the bucket and it can be used and moved. But since we were talking about decomposition, let's go to the vermiculture, another important part of the farm. So this is the last stop on the farm tour. This is the composting and vermiculture. So what is vermiculture? Vermiculture is where worms break down natural or organic material and made into soil. Now, soil is exactly what we use to grow crops in or vegetables. This is important because when we have like a banana peel or maybe it's an orange peel or maybe it's even old newspapers that we don't use or the leaves that came down from the tree. What we'll do is if there were some worms or other creatures that would break down these products, it would just keep on gathering up. Or it might decompose and it might take a long time. So these animals, what they'll do is they eat it and then they create very rich soil. So what we have are vermiculture bins. We have different containers that have worms in. And what we'll do is we'll put things like apple cores and apple peels in the vermiculture bins. The worms eat it and create soil. That soil then we dump out into the vegetable garden so that the vegetables can have really rich soil to grow in. Now, this is important because if we threw stuff like banana peels or eggshells, or maybe it was the leftovers of an onion that we didn't use, and maybe it was starting to go bad, if we throw it away, that's taking up space in the trash and the landfill. That's not good. That's stuff that we can throw out outside and it can be broken down and create soil. So how can you make compost? You can make compost by gathering all the materials. Maybe it's the eggshells, or maybe it's the banana peel, or maybe it's the core or the pit of a peach that you ate. And what you do is you take those and you start creating a pile outside. And this starts to break down and eventually make something called compost. You stir it up and you add different things like newspapers to it that are tore up, or you can add cardboard to it. And this starts to make compost. Now, different things like worms or little beetles can help break it down by eating it. But compost is a very important part because it reduces our waste, but also creates a very important part of the farm. So everything is a circle. So from the soil that the plant grows in up to the plant that the fruit that we gather from the plant. So let's say a tomato plant. We grow the tomato. We don't want to eat the top where the plant grew, so we cut out that top. Then we throw the top into the compost. That top breaks down and creates soil that we then put at the tomato plant. The tomato plant grows up from that soil that we planted tomato plant into. This is very important, and it's a never-ending cycle. So farming is a very important part of culture, and this composting is very important. Thank you so much for visiting Fox Chase Farm. I hope you come and visit us once we are able to open, and I hope you guys learned something today. Farming is so important to everybody because it provides food for you and for me, and it provides clothing for you and for me. Farming is a huge, huge part of our country and our state, and we hope that you learned something, and we hope that maybe we inspired you to do something. Maybe it was you might want to grow a garden, or maybe it's I would like to work with animals someday. We hope to inspire you to do something, and you take care. Have a wonderful day. Learn lots. We'll talk to you later.